Hi Nine, this is Mr. Tapley here for your first lesson of Civics and Citizenship in Term 3 of 2020. So this lesson I'll be going through the lesson plan, obviously, to start off, talking about what is Civics and Citizenship, what is our third topic in Humanities in Year 9, and I'll be outlining the curriculum for Term 3, so what are we doing during our wonderful remote learning, which I'm sure all of you are happy to be back in. Success criteria. Hopefully by the end of this lesson, you'll be able to understand a little bit about the history of Australian politics. So before I talk about civics and citizenship, I should probably talk about remote learning. There are a lot of students who excelled during remote learning in Term 2. A lot of people enjoyed having that extra, I guess, independence, freedom, flexibility, whatever you want to call it, in the classroom, and a lot of them achieved very high results after putting in a very strong work ethic, engaging in class, which means, listening to all the video lectures, reading through the slides, completing all the activities in their student notebook every lesson, and a lot of them saw good results in not just history, but in economics. However, there's always a however, there's always a but. However, there were probably a few students who will be looking to improve upon their results in history and economics during Term 2, who maybe didn't achieve what they were capable of or what they thought they could achieve because they fell a bit away during remote learning. A lot of y'all did really well in history, but then in economics you were like, bleh. So I'm hoping that in Term 3 remote learning, you guys will be staying up to date with the classwork. You'll be watching the video lectures. I had 100 students when we did the World War II essay, and I said in one of the video lectures, oh, by the way, I'm not really going to be having a word limit. And then I had 100 emails after that saying, do we have a word limit? I was like, well, I said it in the video. Oh, they haven't seen the video lecture. Anyway, and of course, asking questions is the best way to do well in anything, really, in school, in work, in any subject. The best way to improve is to ask questions, because I'm happy to help you. You just need to let me know that you need help, that you need support, that there is a problem. I can't fix the problem unless you tell me. It's not like a fire happens and then you expect the firefighters to kind of just show up. If there's a fire, you call the firefighters and you say, "Hoi, there's a problem," and they will come and help you. If you need support, please let me know. Maybe that Mrs. Tapley, this week we have a maths cat and I need a bit of extra time to do last week's activities. And I'll say, sure, that's fine. Or, Mr. Tapley, I didn't really understand that topic. Could you re-explain it? Send me an email, a comment, or something in Google Classroom. And I'll say, sure, that's fine. I'm happy to help. You just need to let me help. Let me know it's a problem. Google Classroom setup will be very similar to Term 2. So on Compass, I'll be putting the lesson plans. The video lectures are going to be linked into Compass and Google Classroom. Google Classroom is where you'll find the majority of resources, so our class slides, textbook chapters, etc., etc. And then the activities that you do in each class, whether they're textbook questions or slide activities, they're going to be recorded in a Google Doc, which I've affectionately called a digital notebook. Just so you guys don't have to show me your messy handwriting and then take a messy photo of it where your thumb's covering the camera and I have to kind of read what you've done. Anyway. I'm happy to adjust the classes. I'm happy to make changes from Term 2. I've already made a few changes because I asked y'all what went well during remote learning, what didn't, and I've tried to improve it. But again, if you tell me there's a problem, I will fix it, hopefully. I'll try to fix it. And then maybe we'll have a bit more fun in remote learning in Term 3 than we had in Term 2. So, getting into the actual subject of what we are doing, which is civics and citizenship. So in this unit, we will be examining features of the Australian political system and evaluating their effectiveness. So basically, what is the government? Why is the government? And is the government working? How is it working? Is it working well? If not, why not? What can we do about it? And then the final half of the unit, we'll be shifting our focus to a global scale. So I guess you can look at civics, as in Australian politics. Citizenship is more looking at global citizenship, so global issues like climate change, like terrorism, like plastic pollution, like refugees and asylum seekers. How do we solve global problems after we learn about Australian problems, basically? So how do we measure up to the world in terms of solving those global issues? What has Australia done for climate change, for example? We've got the Great Barrier Reef in Queensland. Are we doing enough to protect it? And then what is Australia doing in terms of human rights? Lots of countries accept refugees and migrants and asylum seekers. Is Australia doing enough compared to the rest of the world? So that's just an overview of what each half of this unit will be. So civics and citizenship, again looking at politics, and then looking at, I guess, global issues. So citizenship, if we want to link it into our beloved Year 10 Humanities electives, is probably looking at the world on edge. And then civics is kind of looking at you got to fight for your rights, I suppose. It's looking at a bit of legal studies, a bit of politics, and a bit of civil rights. So I'm only going to have a couple of slides for this first lesson. It's a bit of an introduction. I don't want to slam you guys with a lot of content in the first lesson. I'm sure you've got a bit of stress already, a bit of anxiety about going into remote learning. Similar to last term, I'm going to be including those self-care lessons where you have an opportunity to catch up or just listen to music or chill because I don't want you guys to have a bad time in remote learning. So yeah, I'll try and keep it nice and easy in this first lesson. So, to understand the Australian system of politics, how voting works, the key principles of democracy and what a democracy is, it's important to understand how our government was created and why. So we're going back to history, basically. So those who do not study history are doomed to repeat it. You can't understand what the present is until you look at the past. So where did Australian politics, where did our Australian government come from? Where did Australia come from? So until 1901, Australia did not exist. So our country is only just over 100 years old, which is pretty crazy when you consider some countries are thousands and thousands and thousands of years old. Before 1901, the nation was divided into 6 independent colonies. So we were founded by Britain. We were part of the British Empire. Captain Cook came over, discovered it. Oh, look at that. Terra Nullius, put a flag there. You guys watch Eddie Marbo in Year 8, etc. So we actually had 6 independent colonies, or 6 states. So we had Western Australia, South Australia, which ironically covered South and Northern Australia because Northern Territory didn't exist at that point, but anyway. Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, and Tasmania. So these states were responsible for their own activities, their own decisions. There was no shared leadership or power. There was no one who was in charge of the whole country. There were kind of like 6 mini countries, 6 junior countries. However, in 1901, the 6 colonies joined together to create a new nation, and that process is called federation. So if you hear that term, that's what it's about. It's about these 6 nations coming together, they're federating, they're becoming one federal or national government, one national country. And if you want a bit of information about federation that doesn't come from me, I suggest watching this video here, if that gets out of the way. So it's only 2 minutes long, it's nice and short, nice and sweet, nice and colourful, and it tells you a bit about federation in case you need some extra help there. So you can watch that now, you can watch that later in the video when you're doing questions if you need help. This cartoon here, little political cartoon, propaganda, go back to World War I propaganda. This was actually used to persuade people to vote for federation. So some people didn't want to become one whole country, and this is one of those propaganda posters they would put up to convince you to join their cause, I suppose. So barriers between brothers, shall they remain? Look upon this picture, 6 divided countries, or mini countries, and then Australia down the bottom there, everyone's in charge, everyone's happy, etc. So, what did Australia look like before Federation? So when we had those little colonies. Well, the different colonies each had their own government and their own laws. There was little cooperation or coordination between the colonies. We didn't work together, we didn't play nice together, not a lot of teamwork making the dream work. Goods and services from other states were taxed. We had a lot of tariffs, if we want to bring it back to economics, which meant that there wasn't a lot of business between the states. And if we don't sell things, we don't buy things, we can't make money, the economy doesn't improve. So we were kind of working with one hand behind our back. We couldn't really improve the country's economy or our GDP because we were taxing ourselves. It's the stupidest thing. Individual militaries were formed, so instead of having one national army, we had little state armies. And they were just little bite-sized, not really effective armies, weren't very good. And there was no standard set of measurements. So it'd be like if every classroom in GWC had a different number of chairs, different sized desks, different size windows. Basically, they had no standard set of measurements, so every country, or every state, sorry, every colony, did whatever they wanted. So it was weird when you would get on a train in New South Wales, you'd go down to Victoria, but at the border, you had to get on a new train because their tracks were slightly bigger or slightly larger, so the trains didn't work properly, so that was stupid. That caused a lot of issues. And so by the 1880s, people began to support the idea of a national government to deal with major issues like trade, defense, so national defense, and immigration. There's this famous quote here from Sir Robert Garran. I'm not going to go into who he is, but he said the colonies were united by a combination of fear, so they were afraid of other countries coming in and messing them up, nationalism, so over time this sort of Australian national pride kind of created itself before the country actually created itself, and self-interest. Self-interest meaning they wanted to make that money. They were tired of getting taxed, tired of the tariffs. We should become one country, so I'm stop getting taxed at the border. And this just goes into a bit more detail about that. So trade and migration, again, having different systems of government, restricted trade and movement between the colonies. For any of you who have been on an international flight, you know you go through customs, and it's a whole process where you have to give them your passport, they ask you questions, it takes forever, there's a big queue. Imagine doing that when you go from Victoria to New South Wales, or when you go from Tasmania to Western Australia. So every single time you did that, it slowed you down, it slowed everyone down, it was just a whole process. Creating a single national market would strengthen each sector of the economy. So households would benefit, businesses would benefit, the government would benefit. Defense. Famous quote here, divided we fall, united we stand. The tiny little mini armies for each state, crap. Creating a national army would increase the safety of all Australians. The colonies founded by the British Empire relied on Britain for protection. So they were kind of, Britain was our boss, Britain was our parents. We couldn't do what we wanted to do, we had to do what Britain wanted to do. There was a very famous incident near Queensland, so near Papua New Guinea, where Queensland were like, I want this island. And Germany were like, I want this island. And Britain said, you have to do what Germany says. We are telling you to do what Germany says. So Australia could have been bigger, but Britain were like, nah, don't do it. We're like, oh. So we thought, well, if we have our own army, we don't have to rely on Britain. We can do what we want. So no longer relying on Britain, provide Australians with independence, military freedom, and then security as well. Immigration and national pride. In the late 19th century, many people did not support immigration from non-British nations. The colonists wanted to avoid racial conflict within a multicultural society. Australians used to be hella racist. They might still be today. But basically, there was something called, and you'll learn about this in Year 10 history, the White Australia policy, which is basically we only want white people in Australia. And they thought that it would be easier to deal with immigration if there was one person in charge, if there was one national government in charge of stopping people from coming in or getting people to come in. By 1901, over 3/4 of the population, they weren't immigrants anymore, they weren't convicts coming over from Britain, they had been born in Australia. And so there was this sense of nationalism and identity beginning to form. So it was, I'm Australia, woo, we should make a country, and we should keep everyone else out of our country. That was one of the reasons why we decided to become a country. So, with that information there, I'm not going to get you to smash into the textbook just yet. Just using the information from the slides, I'd like you to do 3 things for me in your digital notebook. And I should say, boop, if we go into Google Classroom, you'll see that we've got term 2 information here. So the history and economics stuff, I'll push that out of the way, bottom of the page. And now we've got a nice new shiny folder for civics and citizenship, resources, and then assignments. So you'll see I've made a new student notebook for civics. So you guys just need to click on that there. Student name and ID, lesson topic and the date, and then you can answer these questions here. And then you'll see I've also uploaded the chapter PDFs, link to the video lectures, the class slides, and all of that information is also, that's just the Compass lesson plan there. All that information has also been uploaded into Compass for those of you that still can't get Google Classroom to work properly. So, answering these 3 questions in your digital notebook. Again, you don't need to submit that file. It's not an assignment. You don't need to create a new file every lesson. All you need to do is quite literally click on that. It's your own personal file. You can see it, I can see it. You can answer questions. I can view what you're doing each lesson. I can say, don't write that, or that's really good, keep it up, or why haven't you done this? So answering 3 questions in your digital notebook using the information in the slides. Question 1, define the term federation. Try and do that in your own words. Question 2, after years of acting individually with different laws and governments, what are 2 to 3 challenges or concerns the Australia might have after federation? So we used to be individual states. Now we are one country and we all have to follow the same laws. We all have one government. What are 2 or 3 problems you might see occurring in the future? Question 3. The states in the newly formed Australia have different populations, different geographical size, and different natural resources. So each state is different. If you've been to Western Australia, it's super big. If you've been to Tasmania, it's this tiny little island, different weather, different roads, different people. Should each state be treated equally in terms of the level of their power, their rights, and responsibilities the state receives? So should Tasmania get the same amount of money from the national government as Western Australia? Should South Australia get the same amount of votes, same amount of people in the government as the people from Victoria? So should we all be treated equally? Why? So this question is really more your opinion. This question, you're just thinking about what are some of the problems that will occur creating a new nation out of all these individual states who used to be different and act differently and occasionally didn't like each other a lot. And then question 1, simple definition. So that's all you're doing this lesson, guys. Again, if you have any questions or concerns, please let me know. And yeah, best of luck. Looking forward to the rest of the term and hopefully seeing you in person at some point this term. So yeah, cheers.